Hi, welcome back to the shed for episode 8 of Great Guitar Build Off 2022. And in this episode we're going to take the two body wings that we rough cut a few weeks ago and we're going to properly shape them and thickness them down. So last time we got the truss rod installed and we got the neck tapered somewhere near where it needs to be. There's still a little bit of work to do on that, but I can't really do anything until I've got the wings prepared so we know where to cut these two transitions in. I've roughly penciled them in, but there's nothing to say that that is correct. So in this episode, we're going to take the two wing blanks, which have only been roughly cut to size, and we're going to get these all cleaned up, get them trimmed properly to shape, and also work out exactly how thick we need these and get them thickness down. Now you might have remembered as well that there was a little bit of twist in these. Not so much in this one, but there is some in that. So we'll also be addressing that in this episode. Now these wings, they've been cut to shape roughly on the bandsaw. They're probably around about 1 mil or 1.5 mil away from where they need to be. I'm not going to touch this face at the moment because that just needs to be flat and square, so I can do that with a hand plane. But the rest of it, I'm just going to get these templates on and pattern route around the edge, just take the rest of that material off. Like I say, there isn't a huge amount, but these are quite thick, so it is going to be quite a little job. We're probably going to have to go down in kind of 5 or 6 passes to get all of that material off. At some stage as well, I'll probably have to take the template off and then just let the bearing ride on what we've already cut. But as always, super glue and masking tape and get these two templates attached. Okay, so that's the template fastened on. I've got this clamped down to the bench because it's kind of quite a tricky little shape. And I've got just a normal bearing guided bit. In the big router, I'm going to use this one because it's got a little bit more surface area on the bottom, so it's going to be a little bit more stable as we work our way around this. I've got some ear defenders because it's going to be noisy, and this is going to take quite a little time. I'll be swapping backwards and forwards between the top and bottom wings just to save me time constantly adjusting the route a bit. And hopefully we can get this sorted out with too much fuss. Okay, here we go. Well, that's those routed. Not a job I really enjoy. They were very difficult to do. I really must get my table router fixed. It would have been a little bit easier on there. In the end, I had to resort to fastening them down with super glue and masking tape onto the bench directly, with some little chocks of wood to hold them in position, just to make it a little bit easier. But it's done, and I'm really pleased with the way they've come out. They're relatively clean. They'll need a little bit of cleaning up. There's a little bit of roughness on this bottom edge that will just need sanding through, but apart from that, I'm pretty happy with it. Now you might have noticed when I was routing that pretty much the whole time I was routing in an anti-clockwise direction. And I did that because that is the technique which is going to make it much less likely that you're going to have an issue with your routing. Because of the way that router cutter is turning, going in an anti-clockwise direction means you're getting a nice smooth cut. If you were to go the other way, it's what they call climb cutting, and that kind of introduces a lot greater risk of chipping out and tearing at your wood. You can't always do it. Sometimes the configuration of the workpiece means that you literally have to climb cut on some occasions. If you find yourself in that situation, my recommendation is you try and take as little material off as humanly possible whilst climb cutting, just to kind of minimize the risk of issues. Now that works if you're doing it outside or the perimeter of your workpiece and you've got the router in the configuration we had cutter down. If, for instance, you were routing a pickup cavity or a control cavity or something like that, so you're routing the inside of the cut, you need to reverse your direction. So in that situation, you would route in a clockwise fashion. Confusing, just a little bit. But to add to the confusion even further, if you were to have your router in a router table, so effectively inverted with the cutter sticking up, again, you have to reverse the direction of travel. So in that case, if you were doing a perimeter, you would go clockwise. If you were doing an internal, you'd go anti-clockwise. It is quite a lot to remember. So what I would suggest is, if you're unsure at any point when you're going to be doing some routing, just drop on YouTube, just do a quick search and you'll come up with a multitude of videos which will direct you how you should be doing it. That 5 minutes of research could potentially save you ruining a body blank or a neck blank or something, so it definitely is worth doing. I got a message on Instagram a couple of days ago from a young chap called David, and he was basically saying that he had just joined a woodworking group and he was kind of looking around for a project that he could do, and he stumbled across my 335 build on YouTube, at which point he decided that that was the project that he wanted to take on. I believe it was his first guitar build, so something of that magnitude is quite an undertaking. And what he said was that he had watched and rewatched my 335 series, and every time he needed a better understanding of how to do something, that was what he used as a reference. He was quite open, and he said that it didn't go without issue, and there were some problems he encountered along the way, but you know, that's quite normal for this kind of enterprise, so I wasn't at all surprised at that. And he sent me some photos, and he also linked to a YouTube video that he's put together of the build process. And I have to say, it is very, very impressive to say it's a first guitar build and it was something that complex. So I'm going to leave a link to that video in the description to this one. So why don't we all show a little bit of guitar community love by heading over there, having a look at the video, hitting like and subscribe and leaving him some nice comments. I think that would be lovely. Anyway, back to the build. Okay, so that's those all cleaned up. I've done a little bit of sanding on them, but not too much, just kind of got rid of some of the worst of the routing marks. And I think they're looking quite nice now. So the next thing we need to do is get these down to their final thickness. But before I can do that, I need to take care of any twists that might be in them. And I'm just going to do that with a hand plane, because I don't think there's a huge amount, but there is some that we need to deal with. Now, I've had my winding sticks onto this one, and purely just because of the shape of it, there isn't really a great deal of twist in it at all. So we don't have to worry about this one. In terms of twist, we just need to thickness that. This one, however, and I'll get the camera set up to see if we can demonstrate that, has got a bit of twist in it. And you might be able to see in this shot that this black line on top of the front stick is kind of at the bottom of this whitish pad on this side, but on this side there's quite a lot of timber showing below the white pad, which means it's twisted. So I'll grab a plane and we'll start to take some of that material off, but I'll just mark out kind of where it is first. Okay, and I'm not quite sure how well you'll see that, but I've just checked this and this is pretty much spot on now. The black line is level with the bottom of both of those little white bits. So that is the twist effectively taken out of that piece of wood now. So I'm going to mark that side with a big X. So that will be the face that goes down when we run these through the planer. The other one, there's no twist in that per se, so we'll just run that through as it is and everything should be fine, hopefully. So next up we need to kind of understand how thick these need to be, and to do that we need the central section of the body again. So I cut this down to a little over 45mm, but the finished thickness is 45, and I think I want around about 3mm of difference between both the top and the back of this central section. So that means these need to be 6mm thinner than this. So if this is 45, these need to be 39. So I'll set my marking gauge up to 39 and I'll run a line round referencing off that face we've just flattened off. So that should give me a really good visual reference for when I'm getting these down close to where they need to be in the thicknesser. So I'm going to have a quick clean up, get a lot of the clutter off the bench, break the thicknesser out, and we can get these thinned down. Okay, so we just very quickly run those through and they are down to the thickness we want them now. We'll just need a quick clean up with a hand plane just to like smooth those out properly, but all in all they've come out very nicely and they are very consistently the thickness that we want, which is great. And the observant amongst you would have noticed that I have actually taken the time, after much nagging, to fit the extractor onto the planer, so it wasn't snowing in the shed this time. And there we have the wings kind of at the final shape and thickness, and it feels like we're actually making some progress now. Obviously we've still got this little bit of clunky material at the transitions from the neck into the body to deal with, and we've got this lump at the end that needs taking off, but all of those things can be done later on down the line. The next stage, getting these wings ready for being glued on, is to find some way to locate them properly. Now on the original Firebird builds, what Gibson did was this section here was actually profiled to a V, so it came to a point thus along that whole section, and there was a V-shaped recess cut into the wing, and that located the body wing exactly where it needed to be. Now I think that was done for a few reasons. I think firstly it was done because in a mass production situation where you've got the tooling set up, that is a really good way to center the wings onto the body, and it also gives a little bit of extra gluing area so that the glues they were using in the 60s would do a good job of holding the whole thing together. Now we're not in a mass production situation and we don't have the tooling, so that precludes us from doing that V-shaped joint, and also the glue I'm going to use is more than strong enough to hold these wings on. But I do want a way of positively locating these so that I can't put them on in the wrong location. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to cut some little channels into either end of the wing, and I'll cut corresponding channels into this face and the face underneath of the central section, and I'll put some small pieces of wood similar to a domino that you might have seen from the Festool domino cutter. I'll just put those in as locating pins, and then this whole thing should go together exactly how I want it. However, I've got a little bit of cleanup work to do before I can do that. I know that at least one of these faces on the central section is a little bit out of square, and I need to make sure that these faces are also square and very, very straight so we get a nice joint. However, I think I've covered quite enough for this episode, so I'm going to leave this one here. As always, hit that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll be back very, very soon with the next episode. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.